Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CEO Speaker Series. I'm Caden Vittorini, the CEO and founder of VitFactor, your host. And today we're joined by Dan Cleary. This series is all about asking leaders what they wish they knew when they were in college. So let's dive right into it, Dan. Let's start with your path from student to success. Tell us a little bit about that path. Maybe, a little bit about yourself, first job, major career decisions, and just overall leadership milestones.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would definitely start by saying like I definitely don't feel like I'm fully realized that success yet, and I think that's kind of a journey that's always ongoing. But in terms of where it started, basically got started at when I was at NYU. My freshman year, me and a friend started a little business to essentially make websites for people because we thought that would be more fun than trying to go get internships and such. And it was generally kind of what we were interested in, like building things. And so it's how we got started. And it was kind of simple, like website design, like simple Wix style kind of websites to begin with. And we eventually kind of grew that to start building more sophisticated web applications, mobile applications, like kind of real software. Expanded the team and kind of did that all throughout college. And it was a ton of fun and like it helped me learn a lot, I would say, like at a relatively young age, and make a lot of mistakes, learn how to do sales, learn how to do product development. And the thinking was always like that I eventually wanted to start my own product-based company versus a services-based company, and this was just a really good way to kind of get started and learn a lot. And it came from just generally being interested and keeping up with things. And we kind of just started with that first project that we could get. We started trying to sell our services before we even had like a legal entity in place yet, and then quickly scurried to put one together once we had pretty high confidence that we were going to be closing that first deal. And so it was a lot of things I think that we did the right way. I'm just not overthinking it, kind of just getting started, and figuring out some of the details later and seeing if it works, right? Like, and then once you figure out that it works, then you can kind of move iteratively to the whatever that next step might be. But yeah, that's generally how I got started.
I love that. So what I'm taking away is just taking that risk, just going for it. And even though you guys got started and started to see some success, then you took the legal steps and really got into the depths of things. But right, just go for it, right? Go after what you're passionate about. So thinking back to college, what's a myth about success that you believed as a college student, and what was that actual reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when you're younger and you see like you're constantly, I would say, like comparing to other success stories and thinking it has to be like something like really big or they have to be like really innovative or something like that. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think you can just make something 10 to 20% better kind of around the margins, and that's like can be a nice business. So it doesn't have to be some crazy VC backed scale for it to be something that can really get stuff done. And I think additionally, like you can do more than I would say you're kind of led on to believe, I would say, like at a young age.
Mhm.
For our first contracts, we just like pulled them off the internet. And I mean, this is pre-chat GPT, but obviously like all the AI stuff makes a lot of this a lot easier. And you kind of find out you can kind of just figure things out along the way, and you can be a little bit like liberal with how you attack things as long as you end up delivering like a good service.
Mhm. And what do you wish someone had told you back then when you were a student?
Um, that's a good question. I'd say to even, luckily I was, when you're a student, like in my situation, I was in a place where it's easier to take risks when you're younger. You have less of a burn rate. There's no kids obviously, and there's no like mortgage or like anything like very like heavy in that way. So I think generally taking risks, if you have the capacity to do so, that's the time to really be doing it and exploring it. When you can sleep on a friend's couch, when you have that kind of financial freedom to a degree or just a lower amount of expenses, is just to be more open to taking risks.
Mhm. I love that. And was there like a specific moment or decision that dramatically changed your career path, and what made you choose that direction?
I mean, I think starting that first company kind of really set me up for everything that has been since. I've been running a company in some form or another since then, basically, and that's coming up on like over 10 years now. And so I think that decision was pretty critical because yeah, it kind of moved on to the next couple steps of then continuing it after college in like a different way, and then starting going from a services company to a product company, to building that out and having it, reach some level of success and raising venture capital and like doing all these things that were kind of downstream of that. I think being able to get those kind of early wins definitely showed that what I could do. And then it allowed me to get a little bit more thinking at like a wider level and a little bit more aggressively of like what the next thing could be. Because, I had already achieved some level of success, but more importantly, I just learned that you can kind of figure these things out as you go, and that it's not as scary as it seems as on like the surface.
Yeah. Yeah, we want things to happen now, right? We're a generation of instant gratification. So realizing that these things do take time, right? So, I'm sure you know a lot of college students or maybe a handful. What do you think the biggest challenge that students face today? And like, what would be your advice for navigating that challenge?
Um, that's a good question. Admittedly, I probably don't know what the biggest challenge that they are facing today, just because I'm not living that life
Yeah.
in the day in and day out, and so I'm relatively separated from it this at this point. Um, but I think just being more taking on a more risk taking mindset, I think could be helpful for folks in college who, of course, are in the situation to be able to handle that. And there's like a youth is wasted on the young sort of thing where you only have that kind of period once, and I think you could use it to explore a lot of different avenues. And I think people probably don't do that as much, and I probably should have done it more as well. And of course, it brings its own set of challenges, but I think you're just in a really unique situation while in college to be able to actually like take advantage of that.
The next question is, I want you to pick a number 1 through 5, Dan. You won't know the question until you choose the number.
Let's go with 3.
One thing college did not prepare you for.
Um, I think just like the lack of like professional world simulation is not really accounted for. I think I was able to kind of get some of that through like some of my courses, but I think yeah, there's not a lot of like mirroring of what world kind of looks like once you graduate. And I think that could be something that could is like more shown in some ways of like these are the types of skills you'll need in like the actual like workplace. I think that is kind of missing.
Yeah. And are there a specific skill that comes to mind, like 1 or 2?
Yeah, I think like public speaking, like advocating for yourself, and like um like sales to a degree, those kind of like overlap, but being able to like
Yeah.
clearly state kind of whatever you're working on, I think is also like communication like in a workspace is very different than communication in college. In college you kind of have to hit a certain number of pages, usually a high number, and then like in the workplace, like it's the opposite. You want everything to be like as condensed and as like straight to the point as possible. So it's like a completely kind of different
Yeah.
shift in like the approach.
That's a good example, right? Yeah. And, just presenting in front of a group, right? The public speaking is so valuable. And in sales, no matter what industry you're going into, I always say everybody's in sales because you're selling yourself an idea or a product, right? So the next
Yeah,
question is going to be a
absolutely.
little bit, we're going to do like a lightning round type of thing. So I'm going to ask you 6 questions and I want you to answer, in a sentence or less on the spot. All right. You ready?
Let's do it.
Favorite college class?
That's a good one. We had I think it's called like new product development type of class where you would look at new products being built, and then you would kind of work with a group to kind of launch like your own like through a case study, and that was a lot of fun because I felt like it mimicked a lot of things that I was interested in, like was very tied to the real world.
Okay. Yeah. Your go-to coffee order?
I'm simple. Hot coffee with a little milk, any type, honestly, is all I need.
Yeah. Right there with you. Best book or podcast recommendation?
That's a good one. Listen to a lot of the tech ones. I've been listening to 20 VC with Harris Stebbings a lot recently. I've been getting a lot of fun value out of that. So I definitely recommend for anyone who's interested in the tech world to check that out.
Best productivity hack?
I think just generally taking care of your health and just making sure like you're feeling good, and exercising and sleeping will set you up far beyond like any like Pomodoro time tracking could ever really do.
Yeah, right. Simple. I like it. Your dream mentor, he or she could be dead or alive.
Um, that's a good one. The dead or alive obviously makes you think of like Steve Jobs right away, and it just would be so interesting to hear his thoughts about like what's going on in AI right now, and like that's just something I've been thinking about recently, and just to like know what his approach would be, I think is enough of a reason to say that that would be the answer.
Yeah, great answer. And what's something you do every day that helps you stay grounded?
Um, I think just like spending quality times with loved ones. Me and my wife have a puppy now, and like just hanging out together as like a family at the end of the day, I think is like really key and brings a lot of like happiness and joy and makes it easy to kind of do like the harder things in life.
I love that. Last couple questions here. So what are three things that got you, maybe it's traits, habits, skills, right, that helped you go from a student to a successful CEO? What comes to mind?
Um, I mean, yeah, I think just that like willingness just to get started, not like overthink it and just kind of, you know, just get started with what I was interested in. I think is really has probably paid the most dividends. So not being, afraid and kind of just jumping into things, being generally like proactive, being, a go-getter to some degree, I think has helped. I think you also have like, you know, I think I still get the benefit of this, but especially when I was younger, like kind of naivete of like how challenging some things could be. And so I think that's something you can leverage in a really positive direction. Because if you don't know how hard something is, you're more likely to kind of just jump into it, which I think is generally um, a good thing. But yeah, not being like daunted by I think challenging tasks goes like a long way and has definitely helped me a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, no, this was a great interview, Dan. So if students could only remember 10 seconds from this interview, what should it be?
Yeah, just that if you go and you take that first step, you've kind of, and you get off the metaphorical couch or whatever it might be, is that you're already ahead of like 99% of people. So if there's something you're interested in doing, taking that first step, um, you've already got a far amount of the way there. And so that's what I would kind of leave people with.
That's great. And my motto is 1% better every single day and ties right into what you
Yeah.
were just saying. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks everyone who's watching. If something resonated with you today, share it with a friend or mentor. These conversations are meant to inspire action and change. We'll see you next time on the CEO Speaker Series. Thanks again, Dan.
Yeah. Thanks, Caden.